Welcome to What the Healthcare Podcast. Today is Wednesday, November 6th, 2024. I am your host, Emily, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Catherine and Kate. Both Catherine and Kate have been diagnosed with gadolinium toxicity. And if you aren't sure what that is, we're about to get into it. Thanks and welcome, ladies. Thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you
Thanks.
for having
Yeah,
us.
thank
Of
you.
course. So I'm going to start with Catherine, just because I came across you first on TikTok. So can you share a little bit about who you are and how your health was prior to this diagnosis and what it looks like now?
Well, my name is Catherine. I am 26 years old. I'm from New York. My health prior to gadolinium toxicity was very standard, very okay. I was considered healthy. I didn't have many issues. The reason why I got the MRI with contrast was more for precautionary reasons. So I never had any prior existing conditions. Um, I was a student, a full-time student, because I got gadolinium, I think in 2021. I graduated 2020 from college. So that was really my most active time. I was very active. I was doing extracurricular activities. I was a dancer, literally like dancing 2 to 3 hours, 2 times a week. I was into the arts. I was always filming, shooting. That was my minor. I had two majors also, journalism and arts management. Um, I also worked two jobs. So I always had like a lot on my plate, and I was always a very active person. Whether or not like it was something physical or it was something mental, I always wanted to learn new things and try new things, try new foods, hang around with friends and family. Um, yeah, that was my life before gadolinium toxicity. After I got gadolinium toxicity in 2021, it changed drastically and very quickly. I felt the effects of gadolinium right away. I knew right after the scan that something was wrong. I just didn't know what exactly. And it wasn't until I did more research that I found out it was gadolinium, which is an MRI contrast. Gadolinium is a rare earth heavy metal. I had no idea that they were even using that in contrast. Um, so afterwards, it like debilitated a lot of my health, like movement wise. I was impaired. I had a lot of brain fog, couldn't think clearly. I was having heart palpitations, tachycardia. I had a lot of muscle weight wasting. It was hard for me to even hold up like a bottle of water. It was so intense. And all of this was rapidly, like really rapidly. Like the moment I got this contrast, everything changed. So it was no progression. It was just instantly my body reacted. Um, and it was really bad. It was really unbearable for a good 6 to 8 months. And this was all me trying to learn things, trying to find out what I should do because, you know, nobody knows about this. So it was all me upon discovery, working on things and reaching out to other people who have been affected through Facebook groups and so on. And then I tried to create a plan for myself to heal myself, and that included supplements, sauna, everything out of pocket, by the way, nothing covered by insurance because nobody believes you, right? And I did tell doctors, I told them, I informed them. Obviously, they were not sure. They thought that I had anxiety, they thought that I had depression. They were just all getting on the wrong, they were all getting the wrong idea. And it was neither helpful to me, and it was just actually very painful to experience that. Um, and till this day, I'm still doing things for my health, and I'm still working on myself in terms of eating organic and not being around other toxins because my body is super sensitive now. It can't handle like even fragrances will set me off. That's how impaired my immune system is and everything. Always on fight or fight. And yeah, so it's debilitated me still in that sense, and I'm still not like the energy levels that I had before I was poisoned with gadolinium. I don't have those energy levels anymore. Um, and I just started working, like in 3 years, I just started working, but it's still like a part-time position and it's not exactly what I want to do because I want to film, I want to shoot and all those stuff. And that requires a lot of traveling. And I don't necessarily feel secure enough in my body to do those things yet. And that's all because of gadolinium. And this, I mean, not to mention the mental, like the traumatization that I feel from this procedure in itself is just crazy, you know. And I spent all my savings on trying to heal myself. I'm still spending money on trying to heal myself. Every paycheck that I make from this job that I have currently is towards gadolinium, is towards trying to save what's left in my health. Um, and yeah, it's a lot.
So I'm curious now, from a nursing perspective, from what I understand gadolinium to be, is like you said, it's used in MRI contrast. Your body is supposed to essentially expel it, correct? But there are times that it does not, and if it's not caught in time, it is virtually incurable. And I'm curious, when you were given a consent form to sign, or the doctor was, telling you, we're going to do this MRI and we've got to do this contrast, did they go over warning signs with you at all? Was there, did you have any idea what they were about to inject you with?
I had no idea. Absolutely none. No idea. I wasn't even told I was going to be given contrast until like I knew the day of that it was coming with contrast because they obviously put like an IV in you and all this stuff. Um, and the thing is, I did get contrast before. It wasn't my first MRI with contrast when I developed gadolinium toxicity. It was my second. So initially, even when they had decided to give it to me, I wasn't thinking much of it. I was like, okay, I've received this before. It's whatever. And the blanket term of like contrast is so misleading, I feel, because there's different types of contrasts. There's different types of contrasts used for CT scans. They're not the same as MRI contrasts. It's iodine, you know? So I feel like a lot of people, and unfortunately, it's not common knowledge for a lot of people to know the difference between those two. So when you're hearing contrast, you're just like, oh, it's whatever, it's the same stuff they use in the CT scan. It's just a contrast. It flushes out. Like they just tell you drink water. That's it. Because it's
Right.
supposed to flush out. You're not essentially thinking you just got injected with a rare earth heavy metal that is literally the most toxic of heavy metals in the world.
Supposed to be safe and effective, right?
Yeah.
Safe and
Right.
effective. We've heard that before.
Right.
Um,
Can
so
I
I have
add?
so many questions, but Kate, I want to hear your story too from the same perspective. Tell us who you are and what your health was like prior and what it's like now.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Kate. I'm friends with Catherine. We met obviously through having this shared experience of gadolinium toxicity. And unfortunately, we both were pretty young. So I was in college as well. I was only 23. I was just about to graduate. Um, and I had like a few challenges before. The challenge that preceded my MRI and that led to me getting my MRI was I was actually having gastrointestinal dysbiosis from the overuse of antibiotics. And that was just having and causing inflammation. I was having a lot of mast cell activation. So I was starting to react to things more. And it was just like, honestly, at this point, we are well aware that what I needed not only to focus on healing my gut with a SIBO protocol, but also I was dealing with fungus in my gut too, which the word fungus, it kind of like grosses me out. It's kind of gross to think about it, but that's a risk of taking too many antibiotics, is you can actually get intestinal yeast, which is so poorly recognized. And so I didn't know I was having all this inflammation with it. I knew there was something wrong. But during one of my heightened episodes of mast cell activation, I was having tingling from the mast cell activation went to the ER for that. And that's when they gave me the MRI, because they were looking at it from a neurological perspective, which is really interesting now, because a commonality that you may see across people who react to gadolinium is there are people who either had mast cell activation before, or the gadolinium itself caused mast cell activation. And so I think for me, I probably had predisposing factors, got the MRI. And then for me, as soon as I was injected, I started burning in my brain. I couldn't move my neck after they pulled me out of the machine, which thankfully that was temporary. But then within the hours after that, I started having convulsions. I had a moment where oxygen cut off to my brain and caused brain damage, but that seems to be, the mechanism of that seems to be more in line with, I don't know if you know, reversible cerebral vasoconstriction, where for whatever reason, some people, their blood vessels will squeeze really tight, and that's something I experience now after gadolinium. So I've had episodes where I lose vision in my eye, and I can feel pinching in my head. And this only started with gadolinium. I didn't have this before gadolinium, but I suppose I'm predisposed to that somehow. And so I had these convulsions. I actually had difficulty speaking. So I would on and off lose my ability to speak. I would be slurring my words. Sometimes I had to grunt to communicate. I lost my memory. And I think that has to do partially with losing oxygen to my brain. That is a side effect, unfortunately, of that. I was in bed for years. It took 3.5 years for me to be able to like walk around again normally. And although my case sounds very extreme, it's just quite simply that I went into the hospital with some form of inflammation, and then they gave me a toxic heavy metal that if you react to it, if your immune system recognizes that as a danger, you then have an entire cascade of inflammatory events, whether it's cytokines, whether it's T cells, mast cells, what have you. It can be the whole mix of everything. And it completely disabled me instantaneously. And so I literally struggled with walking. I have a movement disorder, but it gets triggered. So it's almost like when there's inflammation in my brain, it all comes back. So my body, my arms and legs will draw up. I'll start convulsing. And it's pretty wild. And I had none of that before gadolinium. Before gadolinium, I was a normal college student. Like I said, the issues I were dealing with were like SIBO and SIFO. And I so wish I would have just kept the MRI out of it and would have just focused on taking, the recommended course of action for gut dysbiosis. But I even was running before I got gadolinium. So even though I was having these digestive issues, I was able to manage them very well. And every single thing I've experienced before gadolinium, I have been very good at like finding the root cause, addressing it, kind of giving myself the accommodation I need as a human. So like, with food, alter your diet. Don't eat like sugars or gluten, whatever it may be. I was always ready and prepared to immediately do what I needed to do to work through any issue. And gadolinium is the one thing where I have poured years of time into research and trying to figure out what I can possibly do. And the only solution I've really been able to come up with is getting treated the same way that they treat people who are exposed to nuclear meltdown, which is chelation, DTPA chelation. There's also a chelator called HOPO. That the US government recently created a contract, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars contract with the company for them to create this chelator. And part of the reason for that is because of the threat of nuclear war, which is crazy because it's like Catherine and I are just normal people. We were just college students. And the idea that we are now anticipating and waiting on drugs that treat people who are exposed to, atomic bombs or workplace meltdowns or disasters. It's just crazy that we're even in this category because it's like, that's not natural medicine. This isn't just like, it's not the way we were exposed via bloodstream is not a natural exposure. A natural exposure, first of all, gadolinium is extracted from the earth. Sorry, I'm kind of going on a rant here.
Nope, you're good.
But it's not found naturally in the environment. It is used mostly and only for these MRI scans. There are a few uses in the nuclear sector, but I don't know them specifically. Also, like it's found in CDs and refrigerators, so electronics. Anyway, it and the narrative around it. I don't want to call it a narrative, but everything has like studies and science and facts behind it, but then there's also how is it presented to the public? What are we being told about it? And over the course of gadolinium's life, more and more things have slowly come out. Like for example, it actually retains in the body in everyone who gets it. So that's one of the things I've heard people kind of like maybe argue or not maybe understand themselves, is that if you ever receive a contrast dye with gadolinium in it, for the rest of your life, you will have some amount of that embedded in you. And the reason for that is because gadolinium bonds highly. It has a very high affinity for bonding other metals. So when they put it in you, it actually loves your bones. It displaces calcium. It goes into the body, and the body thinks that it's an essential mineral. So the body holds on to it. And as a result of that, the body is using it almost like a building block, but it's not a good building block. It's a dangerous building block. The body is using it to try to create skin or organs or things that you have that you would be, that where like magnesium would be or zinc would be and these other essential minerals would be. And so it's a tricky situation because you can end up having a urine test that shows 0. You're not excreting any because your body is holding on to it, and it's stuck in your cells. And so I think, unfortunately, there's a bit of a misconception, and this is really something that only Catherine and I figured out as a result of going through this toxicity, is even when nothing is coming out of you anymore, it is still in you and it's still a part of your system. And how we can prove that too is by doing chelation and then seeing those numbers go up after we chelate. So I know that was a really long answer. Hope that was helpful.
Very,
yeah.
very.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to keep going. This is what this platform is for. I find that many patients, probably all of them, who have been injured in some sort of way by the healthcare system have been gaslit, and gaslit and gaslit. And so I try to offer a place where you could talk freely and not feel that. And this really truly helps to educate the general public. And I'll be the first one to say, I've said this to prior guests, I commend you both. First of all, it takes courage to do what you're doing, and the knowledge that you two have from, digging in and researching this stuff and figuring out how to cure or help your body, it makes people like myself that have, a degree in healthcare, it makes me feel like a complete idiot. And I'm sure I'm not alone. And I think that's why you guys experience so much gaslighting, because, we are just indoctrinated. And, you guys present new information, and half of what you guys have said already, like I didn't know, so I commend you both. And I want to go back to Catherine for a second, because you said too that you knew right away that you were being affected. What were your initial right away symptoms?
Um, it was like once I got off from the bed, my MRI was done, and I got up. Instantly, the room was dizzy. It was like I was spinning. I still was unsure what was happening. I thought maybe it's because I was laying there for 45 minutes. It was an uncomfortable position. Maybe I stood up too quickly, but still it wasn't going away. I got up. I remember specifically that the MRI tech who had done my MRI was trying to give me candy. She was like, "You did such a good job. Here you go." I was like, "This is the worst, like
House of horrors. Here's your treat.
like it's horrible, like so simple, like the worst form of irony." But yeah, so I got up and then I was just trying to get my clothes and change, and it's just as if my body was just moving frame by frame. It was weird. All my movements were very slow, like snail like, and I didn't understand what was going on. It was just, I was losing my agility essentially. And once I got out, I had went alone by myself because again, this was during the time of COVID, so you weren't allowed to go with other people. So it was just me, and I had taken an Uber there, so I had to go on the app and get an Uber back. And even that was very difficult for me. I was like sitting down, but I started to find myself leaning forward towards my phone, almost about to fall out of my seat. And then I got like, there was a water fountain, and then I got some water and I kept drinking. I was like, I remembered instantly that they told me to keep drinking water. And I was like, okay, let me go and drink some water. My Uber finally gets here. And even as I'm going to make my way towards the door to exit, there is a man, I think it was the receptionist or whatever. He looked at me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I was just like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm okay." Like, still not registering what is happening. It all happens so fast, you don't understand. I literally was going into this place walking one way and I came out walking another. Um, and then when I got home, I started to feel insane head pressure. All I could do when I got home was just lay back down. And my mom was the first one to greet me when I had come back from the test. And she saw the change right away too. She was like, "What's going on? Are you okay?" I was like, "I don't feel so well. I think I'm just gonna go lay down." Um, and I lay down and I'm like waking up in and out of sleep, drinking water, using the bathroom, doing all this stuff. And I'm still feeling horrible and my symptoms are progressing. So I decide to go ahead and try to call the place where I got my MRI done and tell them that I don't feel well. I still don't know about, you know, contrast. I still don't know about gadolinium, but I call them and I tell them that I don't feel well. And then they suggest to me that I should go seek help from the person who had authorized the MRI for me or go to emergency room because there's nothing that could be done here. So my symptoms begin to get worse. They progress. I get muscle wasting, can't hold things anymore. I get heart palpitations, and it's like crazy heart palpitations. Like I'll just stand up and my heartbeat will go 170 beats per minute. And then like I'll get like, I used to get a lot of night sweats too, like my body trying to emit the toxin, but it can't. Um, and it was just a lot of like, I felt like I was going crazy, to be honest, because this all just happened so suddenly. Couldn't barely move. I was literally this pace of a snail. And like all my steps were basically trudging my steps. Couldn't pick up my feet. It was just really, really bad. So I knew right away, but that's not always the case for everyone. And I just want to also like piggyback off what Kate said, that gadolinium gets retained in your body no matter, even if you did not react to it, it gets retained in your body. Because the first time that I got my MRI with contrast, even though I didn't feel anything from it, I'm pretty sure that that accumulation of gadolinium definitely affected me and made me more like capable of progressing to what I am today, having gadolinium deposition disease or gadolinium toxicity. I'm pretty sure it was like a stepping stone for that. So it's just something to keep mindful of, that even if you have previous MRIs with contrast and you don't react to them, that doesn't necessarily mean that the next one you have will be the same outcome. And I think that's needs to be that's what needs to be in the forefront of people's mind when they agree to do this procedure, or they think that they're just, that we're just, the off ones, or we're just the ones who didn't have a normal reaction, or we're just like the 1%ers. Like that's not true. And that rhetoric needs to go, because this can positively happen to everybody. And honestly, I wish that it happened the first time for me because I wouldn't be accumulating. I probably have more GAD in my body than Kate does, you never know. So it's like, and it gets harder for people down the road. People who have 3 or 4 plus MRIs with contrast and they get sick from their 6th or 5th one, it's harder for them to heal. It's much, much harder because their body had been accumulating this over years. And we don't know, like there's no, the FDA did release a statement saying that it does retain in the body, and they don't know for how long. It's an indefinite amount of years. So you never even know if you're able to get rid of it, like ever. And that's crazy. That's just
Is
crazy.
is it Is the majority supposed to go though, and that you hold on to a small amount, or is it you're holding on to all of it and then over time it's absorbing, or your body's essentially getting rid of it?
Yeah. So I can answer this one.
Mhm.
So in people who have NSF, which I think NSF is very widely represented and understood, in 2006, I think it was, they said, okay, contrast dye with MRIs. If you have kidney disease, you can't get it. And I think they kind of spread that message. So I do know that there are a lot of medical professionals who are aware of that and try to screen people for kidney issues before. Catherine and I don't have the kidney issues, but with those people with the kidney issues, the thought process is that yes, they do retain most of it, or a larger majority, maybe not even the majority of the GAD, but a larger amount than people with normal kidney function would. So there's that. But with us, there is actually no indication that we have retained more than any normal person off the street who doesn't react to gadolinium. So for example, the doctor that I saw, he's had gadolinium himself, I think 9 times, and this is because he's an MRI specialist, a radiologist, and he spent his career actually, I guess, using himself as a test subject, which is questionable, but I mean, I'm glad he's willing to try the product out, I guess. But anyway, so he is actually excreting more than Catherine and I are, but he's not sick from gadolinium. So it's kind of, what it really seems to be is that people who get sick with gadolinium toxicity are normal in regard of excretion, and I think the manufacturers themselves claim that around 90% upward is excreted. So we may have retained anywhere from, I mean, obviously not 0. I wish it was 0, but anywhere from a low single digit to 10%. Some people suspect more. There's really no way of knowing because the only thing that you can measure is how much you are excreting. So the answer is just like, we don't have issues with excretion per se. We're not really different than the normal population in that manner. The issue for us is that we are reacting to the metal that's in us. And like, it's funny because people say reaction. You think of reaction as a singular thing that happens once. The problem with us is because it's stuck in our body, we are literally reacting to it on a daily basis for the rest of our lives. And the reason we know that it retains in people for the rest of their life is because our group in particular has had multiple people. There's also a doctor in New Mexico who studies tissues of people, who studies autopsies. There are autopsy reports. We've had cadavers donated, and people retain this upon death. Upon death, you can take their tissues, test it, and find gadolinium in every organ except for maybe 1 or 2.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it's a really big health issue for everybody, and it's crazy that people don't know that. I think it's a little bit terrifying because of that. I mean, I'm sure that, and I think that's why these facts haven't been put out there and they're not being circulated and people aren't being warned of this because they really are scary. I think whether people react or not to gadolinium, I would imagine that someone who's had an MRI or multiple before might hear this and actually be a little bit concerned, which is totally valid. It's very valid. But yeah, for the most part, we just continue to react to it on a daily basis.
Were you given any warnings, or when you were signing your consent form, did they go over any possibilities that this might happen, or you might have an adverse reaction, or any information at all?
So they screened me where they asked me questions, but they didn't tell me why they were screening me. And one of the things they said to me was, they said, "Do you have any allergy to metal?" I said, "I don't know. I haven't really had a lot of exposure to metal." They asked if I had metal in my body, which I thought when they asked me if I had it in my body, maybe that was related. I did not have the forethought to think, oh, they're asking me if I'm allergic to metal because they're going to put a metal in me. I did not, that was not on my radar. They also asked me about my kidney function. And, they said, if you have kidney disease, you won't be able to tolerate the contrast dye. I didn't realize that cannot tolerate meant you will develop a fatal disease from. Because NSF is fatal. People end up passing away from it because their organs harden, which, I mean, that's a whole other ballpark, so we don't even really need to go into that right now. But those were the things I was warned about. Then the other thing that happened, or I wasn't warned about them. I wasn't warned. They asked me questions, which I'm not deducing things from these questions. I'm not making connections. I'm just answering the questions. The other thing they asked me was, have you ever had allergic reactions to medications, or are you allergic to anything? I said, I'm allergic to certain antibiotics and I'm allergic to gluten. And they said, okay. And that was my entire screening. So there was no warning, unfortunately, about gadolinium. And I've wondered if that's possibly because I was admitted to the hospital. I know that Catherine went to a facility, but I was admitted, and apparently they had a message go out in, I think, 2018. Maybe it came as a result of a 2017 meeting with the FDA, where the FDA required, or I guess by honor required, where it's like technically optional. They can't require you to do anything, but they are asking that people, facilities warn people about this reaction or something. They wanted, they made a paper and they said you need to give this medication guide to patients. However, that rule doesn't apply if you're in a hospital. So if you're in a hospital, they don't have to warn you of anything. If you go to a facility, they're supposed to warn you. Do they always do that? No. If they don't warn you, can you report them? No. I've tried reporting facilities before. I've gone to the FDA and said, hey, so they're not there. We have patients reporting that these facilities aren't following this rule or this recommendation. How do we report them? They say you have to go to the state board, like, don't deal with us. So it's like, it's an honor thing. And it's like, well, if it's an honor thing, I mean, in reality, what I think it is kind of a liability thing, where it's like, if a place chooses to warn you before, they probably have a better case than if they don't. But that doesn't really help the patient. That's helping the facility. And by not being explicit with us, it is literally putting our lives at risk. And so, yeah, Catherine and I were just normal college students, and in an instant, everything changed.
So how, and if Catherine, if you want to start, and then we'll move back over to Kate, but how difficult has it been to get your diagnosis that you have gadolinium toxicity? How did they tell you you're crazy? Did they chalk it up to anxiety? I mean, I can just, because there's a million things going through my head. I can't imagine. And a lot of that is, Kate, liability. You're right.
Right.
So what was that journey like for you?
It was extremely difficult. Until this day, I wouldn't say like I have a diagnosis, because still gadolinium toxicity is not widely like acknowledged by the whole medical community. So we're still kind of those people who are just like, we're kind of in the land of make believe to them. Um, but I knew that when I started reading about it, I was doing research, more and more research, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And then I saw gadolinium popped up. And I was like, oh my God, like this could be what I have, because a lot of the symptoms were correlating to what I experienced. Um, at first, I was just like, okay, my kidneys, because like Kate said, it seemed to be an issue when you had impaired kidneys. So I was like, essentially, my kidneys were fine, because I went to the doctor a little couple of days after I got the MRI with contrast. And I was like, okay, my kidneys are fine. So that must be then everything is okay. So, but it wasn't. And when I did more research, I found out that Mayo Clinic lab actually tests people's urine for gadolinium. They have like a 24-hour urine collection test for gadolinium, which I found really suspicious on its own. Like, why does this test exist if this isn't a harmful substance that could retain in people's body? But so I basically had to get my primary physician, to try to order this test for me. And at first she was giving me a lot of problems with that. She was just like, what kind of test is this? It doesn't make any sense. I usually don't order this type of test. I don't think I can do it. Like, I was probably there for a straight 2 hours trying to get her to order the test, trying to call people from Mayo Clinic lab and all this stuff, trying to convince her, while I'm literally essentially dying. I'm literally in there trying to fight for myself. And then at the end, she's like, okay, I'll order the test and whatever. I pick it up from a lab. I get 24-hour urine collection test, and I submit it and I send it over. And The results come back, I think, a week after, and I collected the urine about 5 days after I received gadolinium.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the results. Well, she called me first and she was just like, hey, can you talk right now? And I said, yes. And she's like, I got the results. It looks like you tested high for gadolinium. And I went back to the document because she put it in my portal and I looked at it, and the reference value for gadolinium was less than zero point 0.8 mcg. I was emitting 343
Oh my
mcg.
gosh.
This was like days later, almost a week
Wow.
later. So that was very alarming. And it was a relief, and it was also devastating because I was like, okay, I know I'm not crazy. Like, I know I'm not making this up. This thing really devastated me, but I didn't know how much yet. I was still confused. I feel like as you go along the journey, you have several devastations to meet. um so yeah, so that's how I knew right away. I guess that would be my diagnosis. But like
Mm-hmm.
Kate said, it's really hard to diagnose gadolinium because it embeds within our organs, our tissues, our bones, everywhere. There's not really a way to see that unless you do a biopsy of every part of your body. But that's obviously
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. And even then, what's the point when you're not going to be met with any justice, any form of treatment, cure? Like, it makes no sense. So, yeah, so urine and I think hair tests also is something else people do. But urine is just how much you're excreting. Like she said, it's just how much you're excreting. So people do also do blood tests, but the blood test is not really preferred. Maybe in the beginning when you first get injected with gadolinium, because gadolinium doesn't stay in the blood. So yeah, I mean, those are the main ways to try to get diagnosed. But other than that, it's all based upon symptoms. Like we essentially didn't need to see the paper for us to know that something was wrong. We
Mm-hmm.
felt it. We already knew it. It's just for people. It's just for people to
Mm-hmm.
show, hey, this thing affected me, but we already are living it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Has your doctor been helpful in in the realization that this was what was happening to you? Has your doctor, what's the word I'm looking for? Given you the validation that you deserve, that okay, yes, this is what's happening to you, and helping you through that, or is it kind of like that,
it's very, I was validated in the fact that she was like, okay, yeah, this thing is wrong. Like, this is what's wrong with you. But she had no way of really helping me. And she said that she wasn't, used to things like this. She doesn't have much knowledge on it. She just basically, I think every doctor, when I told them about it, they kind of were just like, we don't know. Either we don't really believe you, we don't think you have it, or like, I don't know. They just start to like basically send me to different doctors. They're all sending me to different doctors, basically tossing me around I'm a I'm a ball, and just like, here, you go here, go here, go here, go here. And nothing was working, and it's so devastating for me. Essentially, like, I stopped seeing doctors. The only reason why I see doctors now is because I want to, like, just check for maintenance keeping, really. But it's not because I expect to find a cure at their hands, because I don't. It's very, like, devastating, and it's very painful, and it's very hard when you have something wrong with you and you have to constantly explain to people what it is. It's very, like, re-traumatizing, and and it's people that you're seeking help from. So it's just like, how are you going to help me? And this is your first time hearing about this. It's just not, like, to me, it doesn't seem plausible or
mm-hmm.
feasible. So yeah, so I've been around doctors. I've been shopping around for doctors. I've gone to gastroenterologists. I've gone to pulmonologists. I've gone to cardiac specialists, cardiologists. I've gone to hematologists. I've gone to rheumatologists. And this is not like, this is something that all people who have gadolinium can attest to. We all go through our fair share of doctors from every single department, every single like field or whatever, because that's the way our symptoms act. Like I had a really hard time breathing at some point. So I went to a pulmonologist to check what was wrong with me, cardiologist because I either have chest pain or like I'm always getting heart palpitations, and like gastroenterologist because like I'm not passing stool or whatever the case may be. Like we are all going through these things because we have a million different symptoms because gadolinium is just attacking literally everywhere. So it's just it's a lot to the point where at this point you're just like, I'm just gonna stop. I'm just gonna make like I'm just gonna stop because you feel like you're going crazy. You're just like, I need things to slow down and I'm just gonna stop and I'm just not gonna go. Maybe this is a flare up. Maybe this symptom will come and go, and sometimes it does. A lot of times I had like headache. I had a crazy headache on and off for a month. Usually people who are not suffering from gadolinium would go straight to a doctor, probably get an MRI with contrast right away
Mm-hmm.
for a month-long headache. But me, I don't.
You've lost
So,
trust in the system, I'm sure.
oh yes.
And it sounds like they don't really know what to do with you. So it's send you to this specialist, this specialist, this specialist. So how about you, Kate? Did you have a similar experience or
So mine was a little different. One thing I just want to touch on that Catherine brought up was she said to get proof of gadolinium, you can get biopsies, and that's true. You do have to order special testing, but in our group alone, we have found that there's gadolinium in hair, sweat, nail clippings, breast milk. Children get gadolinium from their mothers if obviously if exposed while pregnant, but even when not exposed while pregnant. So if you have a baby and you're breastfeeding and you get gadolinium, you will be passing gadolinium down to them because gadolinium is really close to calcium chemically. So your body thinks that it's giving calcium to your baby and it's actually giving gadolinium to your baby. And so there was a lady who was pregnant who had a baby. Her baby came in with, and his baby teeth grew in. When his baby teeth grew in, they were brown and decayed because they weren't calcified. So the doctor or the dentist said, "This is what you see in someone whose teeth is not calcified," and that was because of her receiving gadolinium and then getting pregnant. And she got pregnant over a year after, but she
oh
still
my
passed
gosh.
gadolinium down. There are other people. I mean, this is kind of scary, but one thing, unfortunately, that people experience too is EMF sensitivity, and it varies based on how much people have gotten. But because gadolinium is paramagnetic, it, when exposed to a magnetic field, becomes magnetic. And so I know a woman who had 3 children. She said her first daughter was the most sensitive to like electromagnetic radiation because she would get headaches if they turned certain things on or if they drove by cell phone towers, which that it sounds it like I know that it sounds wild, but that the reason it's wild is because gadolinium is not biological in the human body. So you start putting weird elements on the periodic table into people's body, you're going to have weird effects. And so she said that with each child she noticed that they had less issues, and her first child had the most cavities and then the next one was better. And I was like, that's wild, but they found a lot about what gets passed down in the womb to the babies, and sometimes first children can get a lot of that load. So there is proof and there is ways of proving that you are passing gadolinium down or that you have gadolinium. Biopsies are a great way. I mean, I've never gotten biopsied because I don't really want to partake in that. I'm kind of like Catherine, where I avoid going to the doctor at all costs. But in terms of being gaslit, I was gaslit immediately. I had an episode in the hospital where it mimicked stroke, but I believe that the mechanism is, I actually know that the mechanism is different than traditional strokes, and it has to do with that cerebral vasoconstriction. Um, when that happened, I had doctors come into my room, stare at me while it was happening because, I had speech alterations, which can happen with cerebral vasoconstriction. Um, and after it happened, they asked me if I'd ever actually don't know if I should say that because it's kind of a trigger warning, but they essentially asked me, one doctor literally asked me, have you ever thought about taking your life?
Oh.
And I was like, I'm not kidding you. My thought in my head was, no. I mean, I talked to her, but I was like, am I going to want to after what just happened to me? Because it was almost scary. It was like I said
That is a
to
scary
her,
question.
yeah, that is terrifying. And it turns out it's because she's had a personal experience with someone in her family taking their life. But the thing is, that's not even relevant to my situation right now. I didn't come in here struggling with mental health issues. That wasn't even on the radar of what's going on. I don't have anxiety. This isn't a manifestation of anxiety, which is what she tried to tell me. And the reality is, like, you can put up with some of that if your symptoms are mild. Like when I was a kid, I had headaches, and it turned out to be from a gluten allergy, and I allowed doctors to tell me, "Oh, you're maybe anxious or you might have slight depression." Like I kind of allowed them to push me around when I was a kid. And I don't know if push me around is the right word, but let's
You were
call
gaslit.
symptoms what they are. Let's call them what they are. It's a headache. It's not depression. Okay, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. Like I understand if depression can. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, it is so life altering that that those are just attempts to diminish what you're going through, and it's like we're in two different worlds at this point. If you're talking about anxiety, I'm currently going through a chemical alteration right now. Like Catherine and I are not in our right minds in this world. We feel like we just teleported to a different dimension because there's metal in our brain, and what's responsible for your perception of reality, what's responsible for your ability to see, what's responsible for your nerves functioning and communicating to one another. Your brain is so essential to your body, and if you add a heavy metal to it, things are going to malfunction. So if you see me having a symptom, like, for example, heart palpitations, doctors sometimes try to say that that's anxiety related, but it's not. You can have a physical symptom that someone else may also have if they have anxiety. That doesn't mean we're experiencing the same thing. So immediately, yes, people gaslit me. Then I didn't go to doctors for I think 17 months. I messaged with my GP, tried to speak with him. He was really shy about it because I think he potentially believed me, but he just wasn't like really willing to make a statement. Like he was like, well, we don't know that the gadolinium caused it, but he said, but here's the thing, Kate, I think at this point you should go outside of Western medicine. That's what he said to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and he was a cool doctor. I loved him.
Sounds it.
Yeah, like I just loved his attitude. He never gaslit. He was phenomenal. And like, yeah, anyway, we don't even need to get into that. But just by him not gaslighting, I felt like he was already a gem. And so, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to do with my digestive issues either. He witnessed it go from dysbiosis of the gut to metal poisoning. And I think he was probably just like, I have no idea what's going on here. But then I had a doctor reach out to me. And I had reached out to him previously, but the reason he reached out to me was because I started making awareness videos on YouTube. And he said to me, I think that you can get better to some extent. And I was like, I had known about chelation as an option, but a lot of people, I don't want to say fearmonger because it is a difficult thing to go through, and you can absolutely have worsening of symptoms when you're experiencing it. But there were a lot of people saying that you would get worse. Things would get worse if you chelated. And so I didn't do anything for 17 months. And I also was not in my right mind. I had such severe brain inflammation that I couldn't order tests online. I couldn't remember things. Like I was actually kind of just a floating human being without much executive function for a while. So when that doctor reached out, my parents essentially arranged for them to take me down and get chelated. He saw my convulsions, all of that, and immediately validated everything. He is technically my diagnosis. When I was in college, he wrote me letters saying, hey, she's disabled by this rare thing called gadolinium deposition disease. He's the one who came up with the name gadolinium deposition disease. And having him has been really, really valuable. The only thing is he does it through his own private practice. So it's not like it's tied into my normal medical charts. And so it's not stuff that doctors Like they don't go into my chart and see, oh, she has gadolinium toxicity or she has gadolinium deposition disease. And so they don't really know. I've tried to tell them before, and I know that like they've written some things down. I've had doctors witness my convulsions, and you know, one of the craziest things that happened was one of the times when I was convulsing a lot, it was for hours daily. I I used a wheelchair to go into the doctor, and she took it away from me, and I was like basically crawling on the ground.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And I'm like, what kind of care is this? Because for her at that point, she had decided that I had functional neurological disorder. And so she had decided that a wheelchair wasn't appropriate for me, which is just ridiculous. Like that
Wow.
is so demeaning. And for her, it was interesting meeting with her because her very first meeting with me, she was so kind. She was like, we're going to get this figured out. It's okay. She was so comforting. I told her what happened. And then she went and talked to her colleagues. And then the next time we came back, she said, hey, I went and talked to my colleagues. So even though you say chelation worked for you, she said it like that, even though you have this doctor who's telling you that you have gadolinium toxicity, you don't. You have functional neurological disorder. The chelation was a placebo effect.
Oh, wow.
And that doctor that you saw is a criminal. Yeah.
That's brazen.
I know.
Oh my
She took a
gosh.
wheelchair away from me. And so anyway, she just told me
Wow.
I needed to go to therapy and that it would work it out. And my conclusion for that is she was so kind to me when I first came in, and then she flipped a switch. So quite frankly, what I think happened was her boss was the same company that poisoned me. And so I wouldn't be surprised if she went back starting talking about this with colleagues, and then maybe they decided it was kind of a liability thing. Maybe they didn't want to put any of this in my charts properly. I think that's another thing. Like after I was in the ER when I had my initial episodes after getting the gadolinium, they essentially discharged me right away, which was funny because to get the MRI, I'd been waiting and I had been admitted to the hospital. But I think once they saw me convulsing, and I'm not trying to make speculation here, but I've seen enough patterns with this system where I genuinely think that they have purposely tried to get me out of their office so that they don't have more things to write down that pertain to this, because they were the ones who told me that I had been given gadolinium because I had those symptoms right away, and they had followed up with me. I mean, it's just confusing because it's a little bit of give and a little bit of take. They said to me, "Oh, you have gadolinium. Go to the ER. They'll flush it out of you." I show up at the ER, and they say, nothing's wrong with you. Go talk to your GP. We can't give you any tests. There's no heavy metal tests that test gadolinium. So I'm not kidding when I'm saying I almost went through some kind of like psychological warfare with these people, not with me partaking, that just them flipping the switch on me back and forth. And so it's like, we're kind to you one day, the next day you're crazy, and the doctor who helped save your life is a criminal. And it's like, I just can't follow it. And I didn't really sign up for this. Quite frankly, I just thought I was getting a safe scan. And so it's like, I don't really want to partake in this. Whatever weird thing is happening surrounding this drug, I don't want to be a part of it. Please leave me out of it. And if you can help me, help me. Like, don't leave me convulsing. I mean, I literally have had days and weeks and months where I'm alone in my room and I'm so sick. I have vertigo. I'm shaking, like just scary stuff. And it's like crazy to think most people would go to the hospital for that. And here I am just hoping I don't die in my room alone, you know?
Yeah, the gaslighting. I mean, I know I keep saying it over and over again, but I mean that's what happened to you both, and it's really frustrating to watch from a clinical perspective and from just a fellow human perspective. It really messes you up. I mean, we have intuition. We know when something's wrong with our bodies, and to be constantly told no, 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 it essentially separates you from your intuition, and you do feel crazy. And then, the trust goes away. You feel like you can no longer lean on that system that's there to help people. So what's it left you both? We'll go back to you, Catherine. What other modalities have you used? Have you sought care outside of Western medicine and done anything like naturopathic, or are you just kind of managing symptoms as you go? Is there anything specific supplement wise? Anything you can share on that standpoint?
Um, yeah, so I looked outside of Western medicine. I realized right away that they couldn't really help me, but I did do a lot of like naturopathic types of medicine, naturopathic modalities. I searched from naturopathic doctors, specifically ones who had already known about this. I felt that it was better for me because even then, even when even when they don't know about it, but they choose a more natural approach, you kind of get a lot of roadblocks there, because it's still just something that they're not familiar with. They deal with heavy metals, but nothing like gadolinium. So I did a lot of research on my own, but also talking to other people and asking them what, helped them heal. I did sauna a lot, infrared sauna. I was told that like infrared sauna can penetrate our skin deeply, allowing us to sweat and remove toxins such as heavy metals. I did that religiously for months. For months, and I didn't have infrared sauna in my house. Now I do, but I didn't have one, so I was like going out to places. I remember the first time I had to go as far as Brooklyn to get an infrared sauna. Thankfully, I found one not too far from my home, but it was through that like another I don't know how much money I spent on that, but I spent a lot of money on that. Getting a membership, going every day to the sauna for like 45 minutes to an hour, trying to sweat everything out. I did that religiously. And then I changed my diet completely. I mean, even the things that I used to eat didn't even appeal to me anymore. It was like I can no longer digest them. So it was very easy to change my diet because that's honestly what my body intuitively wanted to do. I know
Mhm.
for some people it's difficult for them, or they're like, oh, I can't do this. It was kind of like, I cannot eat that, or I feel like I'm gonna die. So I'm like, I'm gonna go to these vegetables right here and these fruits and stuff like that. So I started eating organic and what is considered organic, because you never know these days really, but I try to eat organic and as healthy as possible. I gave up meat. Some people don't give up meat. That's entirely their decision. I decided to give up meat. Um, and I took supplements as well. Those were suggested by naturopathic doctors, what supplements to take. I was taking NAC, CoQ10, ALA. Uh, Gosh, the supplement list is so long. It's so long. I think that's the thing that most like made me in debt was the supplements,
Mhm.
because they're so expensive, like $40, $60 a bottle, but it's all like, you're essentially trying to save yourself, so it's just like you don't care. You're just like, if this is what they tell me is going to feel better, I have to do to feel better, I'm just going to do it. Like I don't care. But it definitely like it stacks, the amount of money stacks up. But yeah, just essentially those things is what I'm doing. I did different protocols. I did um I did ozone therapy once or twice or three times. I don't really recall. I think it was three times. I
Can you
did
explain what
that.
that is? What ozone therapy is?
Yeah, so like O3, they use, well, there's different forms of ozone therapy. You can get it injected into you. It's like O3. It's like H2O mixed with it's like essentially hydrogen peroxide
Mm-hmm.
kind of, but so you get it injected into you and it's supposed to be fighting things like free radicals and helping form like helping with blood circulation and form blood cells and white blood cells, and just like essentially trying to rejuvenate the body, giving more oxygen to the body, to our organs and things like that. So I did that therapy, but I didn't inject it. It was more of a transdermal type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more like a ozone sauna kind of. I did that. I never did chelation. There are people who have done chelation and it has worked well for them. Kate, it worked well for her. but I was always like hesitant about chelation. And there's people who are like that too. They're more hesitant. There's people who are more willing to try. There's people who have done sauna and they've seen that has worked for them, or there's people who've done chelation and seen that has worked for them. The thing is, our bodies are so different, so you never know what it's going to respond to well to. So it's like that. I think everybody just we're all just still trying to figure out and find out what works for us in the process. Unfortunately, for this type of thing, it's going to be trial and error. It's going to be trial and error. And it sucks because it's at the expense of our bodies and how we feel. Like the error could last for however long. It could last for months. It could last for a week. Like you never know. It's kind of like Russian roulette, but it's kind of like you either bite the bullet or you let it hit you, you know, because it's kind of like, what do I do? Do I just sit here and not do anything and not try anything and then maybe get worse from that, you know, instead of trying something that, you know, I might not fully know or might not fully have much knowledge on, but I say essentially it's working for other people. Like we all have to, you know, it's a lot. It's mentally taxing, but yeah, those are the things that I do. And even right now I'm doing a protocol, but you know, seeing if it works for me. But if it doesn't, then it's like on to the next thing, you know, it's just
So managing symptoms, not so much trying to get it out of your system at this point, because that's, I mean, I'm assuming that's just not going to happen, or maybe over time. But it's managing symptoms, keeping yourself healthy, preventing further issues. Is that
this is where I'm at. I definitely do want to manage my symptoms, but I'm also hoping that like I'm looking at my body as a whole. Yes, you know, I retain gadolinium, I retain more gadolinium, but there's also like I don't know how to explain it. Maybe there was like predispositions that I had before going on. Like Kate said, you know, like for instance, she was taking antibiotics, it messed her up. She got SIBO, she got um like an overflow of yeast in her gut and stuff like that. We're all exposed to toxins, right? We all have a different toxic load. Um, and I think that in this day and age, like those are just things that we have to factor in before we do procedures like MRI with contrast or whatever, because that's going to be a big telltale sign whether or not this will directly affect our health or it's something that is more in the background accumulating, you know? So that, wait, can you restate what was it you asked?
No,
I don't want to get off topic.
no, you're good. You explained. I was asking, you know, what you do from this point forward, you know, managing your symptoms, and you've answered that. You're managing symptoms, you're trying to keep your body healthy, you know, being careful what you eat, what you put inside your body, as to not you know, put more heavy metal, more chemicals in your body than what you already have. So you've answered that well. And Kate, you have seen a natural. I'm assuming the guy you saw was a naturopath that did the chelation therapy,
So
or
this is really interesting. He's actually an ex-radiologist. I mean, he still counts as one. Legally, he's a radiologist. But he was one of the most well-written people on MRIs. He has over, I think, around 400 publications, or what is it called? Journals, papers. And he's also written textbooks on MRI. So he has his whole career used gadolinium, injected it into people, ordered MRIs with it. And he had a few patients come to him and say, "Hey, I'm really sick from that MRI you gave me. You told me it was safe." And he switched up his career because he was in charge of MRI safety at UNC Chapel Hill previously. And so his whole moral compass is safety, safety, safety. And he brought this up as an issue, got pushed back, and then ultimately became an independent physician helping people with this and studying the disease. So he is like kind of one of the most published physicians on this. And so I went to him, which
Very
is
cool.
a really interesting story. Yeah, unfortunately not covered by insurance because of the independent practice, but at the very least he has an extensive background. And so that's why, like, when I was in college, I had to ask for some part of my scholarship back because I had been gone for an entire year. And he was willing to write a letter validating my disability, and my school gave it back to me. So that was a really, really helpful resource. And I feel bad for anybody who doesn't have that resource. But the thing is also, you can, if you have this disease, you can consult with him and he would validate your condition to people, which is great. And actually, there is an ICD code for gadolinium toxicity that was recently created by another doctor who was poisoned with gadolinium herself, and she worked her butt off to get those codes for us. The only problem, there is one little problem with them. The only problem is they have categories. So it says gadolinium toxicity general. They have categories. The categories are like, one of them's assault, one of them is accident. There's not a single category that says from MRI die. So they name other ways that you can get gadolinium. It's like, people are getting gadolinium from MRIs. Like, who's being assaulted? I mean, I think mine falls under assault,
Right.
Like, I was assaulted with it, but it's like, let's admit what this is. So
Liability.
So yeah, I can't remember the question either.
Well,
Catherine,
what I was
losing
going to
our
get
memories.
in, it's okay. I know there's a lot. We've been going, we're over an hour now. So you guys have, done a fabulous job in talking about these things. So I know it's hard I forget questions too, so you're fine. But what I was getting at is I assumed he was a naturopath. But my question, I have two questions for you actually. First is, can you explain what chelation therapy is for people? And then can you explain what you're doing from this point forward? Are you doing similar to Catherine, where you're just maintaining, eating healthy, watching what you put in your body? Are you taking supplements? So start with what chelation therapy is and then kind of what you're doing now.
Okay, so chelation therapy is a therapy that pulls heavy metals out of the body. Chelation is used as a general term for all kinds of things. So there are natural substances that are chelators, and then there are very unnatural substances that are also chelators. And the ones I've gone with are the very unnatural one, which may sound counterintuitive, but the reason for that, the reason I chose a synthetic chelator, which grabs the metal in the body, pulls it out of the body, allows you to excrete it either via your GI tract or urine. Those are the two ways that chelators can work. The one I chose, I purposely went with something strong because in metal toxicity, there's a phenomenon that is known as redistribution. There might be another name for it too, but essentially what happens is metals get embedded into your tissues and your organs. So they kind of get stored there, which is kind of where Catherine and I are at. If you took our blood, you would not find gadolinium freely floating around. You would see that it's in our tissues. So as of right now, we're kind of like keeping it there. It's obviously causing us to be sick, but when you circulate it and when it's floating around your bloodstream, you can get even sicker. And so when you chelate, that's the reason why some people are maybe fearful of chelation, is because you're actually pulling it back out into circulation, and then it can redistribute, meaning that it can actually go and damage new places that weren't damaged by it before. So it's kind of this like concerning thing where metal, almost one molecule of metal can go bounce around your body and mess up a bunch of cells or mess up a lot of different functioning. But I've gone with stronger chelators because people who have gadolinium toxicity are so sensitive to the movement of gadolinium that I know people where they did things like zeolites, or they did things, there's chlorella, spirulina, I can't think of any, like, I don't know if NAC is a natural chelator, but there are a lot of things that are natural chelators, and that might work really well for a person who doesn't have gadolinium toxicity. But if you have gadolinium toxicity, that can actually flare you because you're so sensitive to pulling this out. Your immune system is ready to just kill gadolinium as soon as it recognizes it. So I've found that I feel better when I do more intense things, and I will tell you, like, about 80% of the people in the group do better when they do a stronger chelator. So the one that the government just gave hundreds of millions of dollars to, made a contract with, that is the strongest chelator that you could find for a lot of heavy metals. And the other thing about it is it goes through the GI system. So it wouldn't be an IV. You wouldn't have to go to a doctor. You could stay in the comfort of your own home. And this is something that's currently going through clinical trials. And you poop it out. So it's easier, more accessible. It binds onto things permanently, so it holds onto it and doesn't let go, which is really, really important, because then you're not going to have that experience of the metal, getting
Mm-hmm.
recirculated or popped around. I mean, it would be circulating, but it wouldn't
It's got
be
something
able
to
to
bind
make,
to.
yes, it wouldn't make chemical bonds. So this
Mm-hmm.
other one fully binds it. DTPA does not fully bind it. In fact, DTPA can drop it. DTPA is similar to EDTA. So EDTA is used very widely, and I'm sure that's something that you know about. And
Mm-hmm.
most people, when they think of chelation, they think of EDTA. DTPA is slightly more attracted to gadolinium, slightly stronger. And I don't know, Dr. Semelka, the doctor I saw, maybe said it's multiple factors. So multiple times over, DTPA will grab more gadolinium, or is more specific to gadolinium, meaning that it would grab more GAD than essential minerals. Chelation can also chelate out essential minerals. And another thing that's very strange is when they put gadolinium in you, it's actually already attached to a chelator. So you already are having a chelator in your body no matter what you do. If you've gotten gadolinium, you've had a chelator in you before, which is so strange. So it's almost like two things you're not really consenting to in your body. One is a heavy metal, the second one is a chelator. So we've actually seen heavy metal tests of people where they got only the MRI contrast dye. They come home, they take a heavy metals test. Not only is their gadolinium off the charts, but their magnesium and their calcium are off the charts because those things are getting chelated out of their body. Pretty crazy stuff.
So, yeah, that is. And honestly, I mean, the knowledge you two have, I am so impressed. Very. I mean, I'm sorry that you had to gain it that way.
Yeah, we didn't want to know this. Leave us out.
Yeah, I'm
Please.
sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I had asked, I posted a video yesterday just to let people know that I was going to be interviewing you guys. I asked if anybody wanted me to ask any questions. I think we've answered all of them. Somebody wanted to know, well, I assume that if anybody ever wanted to do another MRI on either of you, unless it was absolutely necessary, that you wouldn't be doing it. But somebody wanted to know if you've gotten pushback from providers if you deny the contrast. But have you been in that position as of yet where you've had to get anything else done that would require contrast?
No, because I don't go I don't go
I
to
don't blame you.
doctors. So I literally I don't. The thing, I did go to a gastro doctor like a year ago where they said they wanted to perform an endoscopy on me, but even then I didn't feel comfortable with it because of my heightened sensitivity and the anesthesia. I just didn't know what effect it would have on me. And another thing that I want to shed light on is like with I think Kate said it, mast cell activation syndrome. A lot of people who have gadolinium toxicity develop mast cell activation syndrome. It depends to what degree. Sometimes it can be very severe, sometimes not as severe. It's affected me in a lot of ways in which, like, I have a very big food intolerance and histamine intolerance and things like that. I basically can't eat out ever, can't have a drink ever. Like, and I keep it very simple when I do cook. It's like straight up just, I can't even put much seasoning or spices. All I could use is salt. And there's some people who only have a safe food of like 6 safe foods and that's it, you know? So it really depends. But, yeah, so I think those are also, I'm forgetting again.
It's okay. No, I mean,
I constantly keep forgetting. This is
you were talking
crazy.
about mast cell and how that often people will develop or have mast cell when this occurs.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand why did I relate that to what to
because they
what we
were
were
asking
asking.
if you'd get an MRI again
Yeah, yeah.
and your
Oh,
GI
right. So
symptoms.
yeah, sorry. Yeah. So so that alone, like mast cell activation, people have multiple chemical sensitivity with that as well. So that was a big thing to me. And I was just like, no, I don't feel comfortable getting this anesthesia. And they kept on pressing it to me. They were like, well, we can't see anything without it. We can't do your endoscopy without it, because they wanted to understand why I was having these massive food intolerances or reactions to food. To me, it was like an inflammation in my throat, and it felt like my throat like would close. For a long time, I think for 8 months, I wasn't able to even eat food that was solid. Most of my food had to be blended. So yeah, so then they wanted to find out more answers. I'm just like, well, forget it, because I'm not going to put myself in harm's way to find the answers for something. I just want to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another thing with Western medicine. I think they do all these things to try to find, like, to try to confirm, like, yeah, this is it. But then they don't really offer much solutions when they do find it.
Yeah, a lot of symptom only management.
Right.
And a lot of that is just the way the system is now set up. It is, private equity is a huge thing now in the healthcare system. They've realized they can make money. And so it's, and the insurance guidelines, you have to see this many patients in a day. It's typically 35 patients for a primary care provider. I worked for a specialist once that saw, I'm not kidding you, 90 patients a day. How in the world can you look at a patient as a whole person
Right.
in, a 3-minute time frame when you're seeing that many patients? So you can't possibly, and I don't excuse it, because I mean, look what this is the result. This is the result. People are being injured. Their symptoms only are being managed. And then here's a prescription medication, and now you've got 15 side effects. Well, here's another prescription. Now you've got 15 more side effects. Like, it's just a very, very broken system. So I'm curious, we'll wrap up soon here. I know your battery's getting low and I've taken up a lot of your time, but can you tell me how you two met?
Oh yeah, sure. Wait, wait. Okay, sorry. Is it okay if I answer the question about the MRI?
Oh my gosh, yeah, yes, absolutely.
Okay, it's just I feel like I have a pretty good answer for it. Okay. So in regard to whether or not people should get repeat MRIs, I have been in that situation where I was deciding this myself because I, as a result of gadolinium, experience convulsions sometimes, and then also like oxygen, my blood vessels squeezing very inappropriately and very tightly to the point that I lose vision and my arms pull in and all kinds of things. Anyway, we were trying to investigate that further. Fortunately, the things that help me, there are two things. One is a beta blocker because it helps relax the blood vessels in my brain. And then the other thing is mast cell stabilizers. So there seems to be some kind of mast cell component, and I've only done the over-the-counter ones. I haven't even gone to the prescription level ones yet, which I may explore those. But for now, like quercetin, Claritin, Allegra, curcumin, PEA, SOD dismutase, there are a lot. I've taken those and they actually help so much. So if anybody out there is experiencing anything like head symptoms, weird, or any of these allergy type symptoms, that is something I highly recommend. And then like the beta blocker that I took was a really low dose, just a little baby dose, and it just stops the adrenaline from putting my body into fight or flight and going crazy. So those things help. And then in terms of the MRI, if I had never received gadolinium, I would personally be very okay with receiving an MRI, an MRA, as long as they don't have contrast. I think that choosing that over radiation can make a lot of sense. The only thing people I think it wouldn't make sense in is if people are previously metal poisoned. So sometimes there are people who have mercury toxicity or other kinds of toxicity, and you will sometimes hear stories where they react really poorly to the MRI machine due to the fact that they just already have so many metals in them. But I would say for the most part, for most people, an MRI without contrast, especially if you've never had it, if you need it, that is the one that I would prefer over other scans. However, since I have the gadolinium in me, I am at extreme risk for a flare, and then actually for me personally, my head symptoms would get way worse because, for example, EMFs, just the slight amount of electricity that is coming from these headphones, can actually make me have derealization, tinnitus, headaches for weeks on end if I wear these for like a day or two in a row. And so we are flared so easily. There's a doctor who's recently come out with studies showing that part of the reason people who get sick from gadolinium die, part of the reason for that is because there are actually little itty bitty nanoparticles that have formed in the body from gadolinium. So we're not just dealing with gadolinium attached or detached to a chelator. It actually forms these little kind of microscopic spikes in the body, and then they get stuck in the body because your kidneys can't fully excrete them. They're not even circulating to the point that they could get fully excreted. So we're dealing with this kind of sensitivity to electromagnetic frequency that you never would have had naturally previously. And the thing is, an MRI is a huge magnet. The MRI operates on radio frequency. So if you have this metal in you, it can absolutely pull it out, recirculate it. Now, if you're not sensitive to gadolinium, you've never had this experience before, I genuinely don't know the answer. You could try it, but there's a chance it could flare you. For people who are sensitive to gadolinium, every single person flares from getting even a non-contrast MRI after the fact. And then what's crazy is Catherine and I have been so affected by gadolinium because it affects the ways that your cells function. So the people in the group, we get burnt more easily. Our skin doesn't heal as quickly just from the sun. And so Catherine and I have had experiences where we've had radiation, either in the form of CT scans or x-rays, where we actually flare from just the radiation. And I believe that could be partially because our cells are already struggling with, just being healthy cells. Like our skin looks different. There are a lot of things that change, and they're very minor, and most people wouldn't notice them. But even like my hair didn't used to be like this, kind of like fried. It used to be more smooth. And so that's something I've gone through. And radiation is just adding a lot more oxidative stress to your body. And so it can just basically throw a bomb at it. So I don't really know what the answer is. In a really, really weird way, I had a CT scan. I had the worst flare ever. Truly, it was horrific. My convulsions came back even worse than before, which I didn't know that you could even react to radiation, but it's really just because I'm already having all of this stuff going on from gadolinium. And also I think that I have severe mast cell activation for certain things, and it appears that even getting a scan reactivated my mast cell activation. But anyway, the weirdest thing about that CT though was afterwards, I actually had healing take place in my body, because when you are exposed to radiation, certain cells get damaged. Your body has to come in and replace them with new ones. And this is something I've been trying to read more about, is this regenerative process that can take place in the body. Your cells are smart. They have the ability to reset themselves to a younger age, but it's just a matter of how do you make that happen. And I think with gadolinium, it goes so under the radar. The body thinks it's calcium. The body thinks it's zinc. The body thinks it's magnesium. So it's not necessarily always triggering this healing response that you might get, for example, when you're exposed to radiation. We have evolved with the sun. We get radiation in natural ways, and our bodies know how to handle it. It comes through, it sees damage in your DNA, and it has a process for breaking these things down and replacing them. It's different with gadolinium. This is not something the body knows how to fix itself from. And so what's weird is I had that strange flare to the CT, and as weird as it sounds, I've had person after person with gadolinium toxicity reach out to me after and say, hey, the same thing happened to me. I got a CT. I didn't realize I would flare from it. And for me personally, it ended up making me feel better in some ways in the long run, which is a very, very bizarre phenomenon. So it's really confusing. But in terms of what scan you should get, I think it's really personal. It's really up to you. But just know that if you get gadolinium and you react to it and you develop sickness from it, it may take future scans off the table from you, or it may make it so that you have really excruciating flares with future scans. And so I would just highly recommend that overall people avoid getting gadolinium in their body if they can, and then just get the scan that's appropriate for you without the contrast. That's my personal opinion.
That's great advice. That's great advice. So assuming you two met in like a support group, is that how you found each other?
Yes. Is Catherine still with us?
I'm thinking her battery's probably about out.
It must have died.
Yeah.
But yes, we met in the support group. So we're both named Catherine technically, and we're both around the same age. So we just started talking, and it took Catherine a while because she was poisoned a year after I was. So I was like wanting to be her friend right away. And it took her a while to kind of process what was going on. And then eventually we just started talking and deciding like, hey, let's, be there for each other. Let's work on advocacy. Let's get the message out there as much as we possibly can. So there's good support out there. And
yeah, it's kind of your mission now, like getting the information out. Well, I mean, again, you two, for listeners quickly, we lost Catherine. I think her battery died. So, but that's okay. We're getting ready to wrap up anyway. But I mean, that's excellent. That gives you purpose, I'm sure, like that something good can come out of this, that you can connect with others, educate others. You are both very well spoken and have a ton of information. I've learned many things today. I'm sure our listeners are going to learn a ton. Where can we find you on social media?
So I am on YouTube, and the name is Bonds Without Bounds. The bonds has to do with like chemical bonds, and also it's supposed to be like, oh, we're bonding with each other. And then Catherine is on TikTok as Phoenix Babe with 3 E's and 1 1. We actually are about to have a website soon called Gadolinium64.com, where it's going to be a landing page with links to everybody's information. So all the research you could imagine, all the websites you want to see, everything you need to know about gadolinium toxicity will be linked on there. And the idea is just that, we all have different handles. It's kind of hard to Google this stuff. It's not easily found in the search engine. So if you go to gadolinium64.com, 64 because it's the 64th element on the periodic table.
Yeah.
Buying the domain Gadolinium probably would have been out of budget.
Yeah.
So we just added 64
that's smart,
to the end.
Though. So smart.
Yeah, so and maybe in a week or two, if people want to go on there, check it out. You can see the doctor that I went to. You can see Catherine's TikTok. You can see my YouTube. You can see all the resources. There are terrifying studies on there that are good for Halloween if you're still celebrating. I don't know if you want to read them.
If you want a good scare.
Yeah, if you want to feel spooky. But yeah, so that's where you can find us. We all have different names, and I don't know if it's the same. I know there are some groups where people really come together and like all come under the same name, which is great. But I think for us, it's kind of spanned across decades. People get poisoned at different times, and so yeah, we're just kind of pooling it under one domain. Oh, hey, Catherine.
Oh, she's back. Okay. We were just, I should have told you to plug it in. I wasn't thinking. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I thought we would wrap up before it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because like my headphones were in, so I wouldn't know if you would hear me that well,
Yeah.
But
It's okay. So I had Kate, I asked her, what you guys are doing as far as like support groups. She told me that you guys, she gave everybody your TikTok, handle. She gave us her YouTube, that you guys are going to be creating a website here soon. I think it's awesome. Everything you guys are doing. I commend you both. It takes courage to do this. It is exhausting. Believe me, I know. It's, between just the gaslighting, the opposition. I hope that you receive a ton of support from people that are listening to your content. And when this gets edited, he will put in like your TikTok handles and where they can find you on YouTube and things like that. And what we generally are trying to do is put the episode out and audio version on Spotify and the other platforms, and then on YouTube and Rumble, a bit of a more extended kind of mini documentary type feeling where he'll put in a bunch of your videos from social media.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, like anything he can find that kind of correlates with what we've talked about. So he does a beautiful job. I would love to, have you both on again sometime when you got your site up and running, and if you want to come back on and promote it, I would love to have you. Again, I commend you both. You guys have shared a ton of info today. I've learned things. Our listeners are going to learn a ton. Is there anything else you want to say or promote before we end?
I think we're good, honestly.
Okay.
I think that this was a good conversation, honestly, and I think me and Kate are both like grateful that you open up a dialogue for people like us. It's very important, especially coming from your background too. It's not easy to go against the grain, and we appreciate you for allowing us to come here and speak.
Of course, I appreciate you both for coming on, and the time that this has been an hour and a half, so I've taken up almost 2 hours of your time. I really, 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 truly appreciate you both and everything that you're doing. Again, I commend you, and we'll see you back again when you guys are up and running on your website.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.